Hello everyone, and welcome back. Tonight, we're delving into a curious and rather beautiful piece of history, the story of why medieval monks invented the world's first alarm clock. Before we begin today's video, I could really use your help. We've noticed the channel's reach has dipped a little, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, completely free, and it helps us carry on bringing you new and fascinating stories. Your support truly means the world to us, and together we can keep this channel growing. Thank you ever so much. Now let's get on with today's story. And please, write in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from different corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, perhaps turn on a quiet fan for that gentle hum, and let's begin our journey. I write these words in the year of our Lord 1347, in the scriptorium of the Abbey of St. Benedict at Reichenau, where I have lived these 40 winters past. My hand, which once copied the Gospels with steady precision, now trembles as it guides the quill across the vellum. Yet I must set down this account whilst memory still serves, for I have witnessed something that began in devotion and ended in understanding, though whether we gained wisdom or merely mechanical cleverness, I cannot say with certainty. The story I tell is not of kings or battles, nor of saints who wrought miracles through the laying on of hands. It is a quieter tale, of monks who sought to measure what cannot be held, to divide what flows eternal, to wake when flesh cried out for sleep. It is the story of how we came to build the first timekeeper, the device that now strikes the hours in our tower, and has spread to monasteries across Christendom. Some call it progress. I call it necessity born of failure, our failure to remain wakeful, our failure to serve the hours as perfectly as angels do, who neither sleep nor tire in their eternal praise. I came to this abbey in the year 1307, a novice of 16 summers, sent by my father, who was a cloth merchant in Constance. I was the third son and thus destined for the church, as was the custom. I carried with me little save the clothes upon my back, and a Latin grammar my tutor had given me, its pages worn soft by many hands before mine. The abbey rose from the island like a prayer-made stone. The church tower stood highest, its cross catching the first light of morning and the last rays of evening. Around it clustered the chapter house, the refectory, the dormitory, the infirmary, and the scriptorium where I would spend most of my waking hours in years to come. The cloister garden lay at the heart of all, a square of ordered green where we walked in meditation, where herbs grew for the infirmary, where the fountain's gentle voice sang ceaselessly of water's patient work. Brother Albertus received me at the gate. He was the novice master, a man of perhaps 50 years, his face lined deep as ploughed furrows, his hands knotted with the swelling sickness that comes to those who write much in cold chambers. He led me through corridors of grey stone, our footsteps echoing in the vaulted spaces, past walls where the lamp smoke of centuries had darkened the mortar to the colour of old bread. "You will learn our rhythm," he said, his voice soft as the whisper of turned pages. "It is not the rhythm of the world beyond these walls. Here, time belongs to God alone. We are its servants, not its masters." I did not yet understand what he meant. In my father's house, time had been measured by the sun's height, by the length of shadows, by the practical needs of trade and meals and rest. Morning came when light permitted work. Evening came when darkness made work impossible. Between these poles the day flowed as water flows, without division or definition. Here, the day was carved into pieces, each piece belonging to a particular purpose, a particular prayer. The great bell in the tower marked these divisions, calling us from our work or rest to gather in the church and lift our voices in the divine office. The first bell came in deepest night, while stars still wheeled overhead, and the world lay wrapped in sleep. This was matins, the night office, when we rose from our pallets in the dormitory and descended in darkness to the church. The stone was so cold it burned through the thin leather of our sandals. Our breath made clouds in the air. We sang the psalms by candlelight, our voices rough with sleep, our bodies swaying with exhaustion. then back to the dormitory until Lauds, the morning praise, sung as the first grey light touched the eastern windows, then prime, the first hour of day, then terce, the third hour, then sext at midday, then none in the afternoon, then vespers as evening gathered, then compline, the completion of the day, after which we observed the great silence until matins came again. 8 times each day and night we set aside our work to pray. 8 times the bell called, and 8 times we answered. This was the rule of Saint Benedict, written 700 years before my time, which governed every moment of our lives. Would you have risen before dawn, had the bell not called your name? Would your flesh, weary from labour and fasting, have dragged itself from sleep's warm embrace to stand on cold stone and sing praise to the Almighty? I confess that in my early years I would not. I slept as the dead sleep, and when the bell rang for matins, it was as though I must climb from a deep well to reach wakefulness. The older monks seemed to manage better. Brother Albertus rose always before the bell, spending time in private prayer before the office began. Brother Thomas, who kept the library, claimed he rarely slept more than 2 hours at once, his mind too full of the manuscripts he tended to permit longer rest. But we younger ones struggled. We stumbled to the church half blind with sleep. We sang the wrong verses. We stood swaying, fighting to keep our eyes open whilst the candlelight danced and blurred before us. This is the first battle, Brother Albertus told me, not against heretics or infidels, but against the weakness of our own flesh. The body desires sleep. The soul desires God. Which shall triumph? The question seemed simple enough, yet night after night I failed that battle. Night after night I slept through the bell, or woke so slowly that the office had begun before I reached the church. I was not alone in this failure. Many of us younger monks missed matins more often than we kept it. We were corrected, given extra prayers and fasting as penance, but the flesh is stubborn. It demands its rest. It was Brother Conrad who first proposed that we needed help beyond our own will. Brother Conrad was the sacristan, responsible for the church's maintenance, for the timing of the offices, for ensuring that the bells rang at the proper hours. He was a man of perhaps 40 years, tall and lean as a winter wolf, with eyes that seemed always to be calculating something angles, weights, the movement of shadows across the floor. He had come to the monastery from the world of commerce, having been a maker of watermills and mechanisms for the grinding of grain. His hands bore the scars of that work burns from hot metal, white lines where blades had slipped. He had taken vows after his wife and children passed in a single terrible winter when fever swept through the region. He never spoke of them, but sometimes in the church I saw him weep silently during the prayers for the departed. Brother Conrad kept time by a water clock, an ancient device that had stood in the sacristy for generations. It was a simple thing, a large vessel of bronze into which water dripped slowly from a smaller vessel above. Marks on the inside of the bronze vessel showed the levels that corresponded to each of the offices. When the water reached a mark, Brother Conrad rang the appropriate bell, but this required that someone watch the clock constantly. Brother Conrad slept little, taking brief rest between offices, but even he could not remain wakeful every hour of every night. He trained others to assist him, to watch the clock whilst he slept, but we were unreliable. We dozed at our posts. We misjudged the water's level in the dim light. We let the upper vessel run dry and the clock stopped altogether. More than once the entire community slept through matins because the bell ringer had failed in his duty. On those mornings we woke with the sun already risen, the office unsung, our failure complete. We prayed for forgiveness, but the hours could not be recovered. They were lost, like water spilled upon the ground. "There must be a better way," Brother Conrad said to me one evening as we stood in the sacristy, watching the water clock drip its patient drops. "We are fallible. We sleep when we should wake. We grow weary and our attention falters. But water flows whether we watch or not. The sun rises without our permission. Surely we could build something that would call us to prayer without depending upon human vigilance." I was then 23 years old, no longer a novice but a full brother of the community. I had been assigned to work with Brother Conrad, partly because I had shown aptitude for understanding mechanisms. My father's business had required me to learn something of weights and measures, and partly because my continuing difficulty in waking for matins suggested I needed close supervision. "What do you imagine?" I asked him. "A clock that rings its own bell?" "Why not?" he said. "We have bells that ring when struck. We have water that flows at a steady rate. We have gears and levers. Could we not combine these things to create a device that would mark the hours without human intervention?" The idea seemed both marvellous and somehow impious. To create a machine that would command us to prayer, was this not attempting to master time itself, which belonged to God alone? Yet Brother Conrad's reasoning was persuasive. We were not trying to control time, but to serve it better. We were not seeking to replace divine order, but to align ourselves more perfectly with it. That winter, with the abbot's permission, Brother Conrad began his experiments. The scriptorium had a small workshop attached, where we repaired the wooden bookstands and mixed inks. Here, Brother Conrad set up his tools: hammers and files, pieces of wood and metal, coils of rope and chain. I assisted him in the evenings after Vespers, the time between the day's work and compline when we were permitted some freedom for private study or labour. The first attempts were simple. He tried to devise a system whereby the water clock would release a weight when it reached a certain level, and this weight would strike a bell as it fell, but the mechanism proved unreliable. Sometimes it released too early, sometimes not at all. The bell, when struck, made only a dull thud, not the clear tone needed to wake sleeping monks. He tried candles, marking them with lines to show the passing hours, with small metal pins embedded at intervals. As the candle burned down, each pin would fall into a metal dish with a sound meant to rouse the bell ringer. But candles burned unevenly. Draughts made them gutter and race. Still air made them burn slowly. The pins fell at unpredictable times or not at all if the wax melted around them. Winter turned to spring, and still we had no solution. Brother Conrad grew gaunt with his obsession. He slept even less than before, rising after compline to work by candlelight in the workshop. I worried for him, but the abbot seemed to approve of his dedication. "Let him seek," the abbot said. "The search itself is a form of prayer." It was Brother Anselm, the eldest of our community, who suggested we look to the great machines of the world outside our walls. Brother Anselm had travelled widely in his youth before taking vows, and he remembered seeing in the cities of Italy great public clocks that rang bells to mark the hours of commerce and governance. These clocks, he said, used weights and gears, the weights slow descent turning wheels that moved hands across a marked face, and at certain points striking hammers against bells. "But those clocks must be wound," Brother Conrad said. "They require human hands to lift the weights again. We would still need someone to watch and act." "True," Brother Anselm agreed, "but if a weight can drive gears and gears can strike bells, then perhaps a weight can also release itself at intervals, resetting the mechanism without human touch." This thought consumed Brother Conrad for months. He drew designs on wax tablets, scratching them out and beginning again. He carved wooden gears, testing how they meshed together, how many teeth were needed to turn one rotation of a larger wheel into many rotations of a smaller one. He experimented with weights and counterweights, with escapements that would allow the weight to descend slowly rather than falling all at once. I watched him work with growing fascination. There was something in the precision of it that appealed to me, the way each piece must be exactly right, the way a slight change in one element affected everything else. It was like copying manuscripts, where a single misplaced letter could change the meaning of a verse. Everything mattered. Nothing could be approximate. By autumn of that year, 1330, Brother Conrad had built a prototype. It stood as tall as a man, a wooden frame holding a series of gears carved from oak and ash. A stone weight hung from a rope wound around the largest gear. As the weight descended, it turned the gears, and the gears moved an arm that would strike a small bell after a set interval. We tested it in the workshop, winding the rope to lift the weight, then watching as it descended and the gears began to turn. The mechanism made a soft ticking sound, regular as heartbeat, as each tooth of the escapement released and caught. We counted the seconds, the minutes. After precisely 1 hour, the arm swung and struck the bell. The sound was thin and small in that enclosed space, but to us it was the voice of angels. We had done it. We had built a device that could mark time and call attention to its passing without human intervention. Brother Conrad wept. I'd seen him weep before in church, but this was different. These tears came from triumph mixed with something else. Perhaps the recognition that he had spent 3 years pursuing this goal, pouring into it all the energy and skill that might have been given directly to prayer. Had he served God, or served his own desire to overcome a challenge? "We must show the abbot," I said. That night, after Compline, we carried the timekeeper to the abbot's chamber. Abbot Heinrich was a man of great learning, having studied in Paris before taking monastic vows. He was 60 years of age, white-haired, with hands that trembled from palsy but eyes that remained sharp as winter stars. We explained the mechanism, demonstrated its function. The abbot watched in silence as the gears turned and the bell sounded. When we finished, he sat quiet for a long moment, his fingers pressed together before his face. "You have built a wonder," he said finally. "But I must ask, why? What problem does this solve that prayer and discipline have not solved already?" Brother Conrad spoke carefully. "Father Abbot, we are weak. Our flesh fails in its duty. We sleep when we should wake. We miss the offices, not from lack of devotion, but from human frailty. This device does not replace our will, it supports it. It calls us faithfully without itself growing weary or losing attention." The abbot nodded slowly. "And yet," he said, "there is something troubling in this. We measure time so that we may sanctify it. We divide the day so that no hour passes without being offered to God. But in building a machine to mark these divisions, do we not risk treating time as something mechanical rather than sacred? Do we not risk believing that the mechanism itself is sufficient, that the bell rung by a machine carries the same weight as the bell rung by a brother who has remained wakeful through the night, who has held vigil whilst others slept?" These words struck me deeply. I had not considered this aspect. We had been so focused on the practical problem how to wake reliably for matins that we had not asked whether the solution itself changed the nature of what we did. Brother Conrad, however, had an answer. "Father, is not all creation a mechanism of God's design? The sun rises and sets by laws he established. The seasons turn without human will. The stars wheel overhead in patterns set before the foundations of the earth. We do not create time with this device. We merely reflect in miniature the order that God has written into the world. The mechanism does not diminish devotion. It enables it. It is a tool, no different from the stylus that copies scripture, or the plough that prepares soil for holy grain." The abbot considered this. "Perhaps," he said, "or perhaps a tool can become a master without our noticing. But I will permit you to install your timekeeper in the tower. Let us see if it serves our devotion or distracts from it. Let us watch whether it draws us closer to the hours of prayer or makes us complacent, trusting the machine whilst our own attention wanders elsewhere." And so, in the winter of 1330, we installed the first timekeeper in our tower. It was a larger version of the prototype, built more sturdily, with bronze gears instead of wooden ones where the strain was greatest. The weight was a stone from the quarry, shaped and polished, hanging from a braided leather rope. The bell was our smallest church bell, clear-voiced and bright. Brother Conrad adjusted the mechanism so that it would strike at the proper intervals for each of the offices. The weight had to be rewound each day, which became my particular duty. I climbed the narrow spiral stairs of the tower after Compline, wound the rope until the weight reached its highest point, and descended again to sleep. The timekeeper began its work. That first night, as I lay in the dormitory trying to sleep despite my excitement, I heard it. A clear bell note ringing through the darkness, calling us to matins. No uncertainty, no drowsy bell ringer stumbling to his task. Just the pure sound, mechanical yet somehow more faithful than human hands had been. We rose and descended to the church. Every monk was present. No one had slept through the call. The office was sung at precisely the correct hour, not too early, not too late. When we returned to our pallets, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and unease. Could you measure devotion in the sound of ticking brass? I began to wonder this as the weeks passed and the timekeeper continued its faithful service. We no longer missed offices. We rose when called, sang our prayers, returned to rest or work. The rhythm of our days became more precise, more regular. Yet something had changed. Before the timekeeper, there had always been a quality of uncertainty to our observance. Would the bell ring on time? Would I wake when it rang? Each office required a small act of will, a small victory over the flesh's desire for ease. Now, that struggle diminished. The bell would ring, we would rise. It became automatic, less a choice than a habit. Some brothers praised this development. Brother Thomas in the library spoke of how much better he could organize his work, knowing precisely when he would be called away and for how long. The cellarer, who managed our stores and provisions, found it easier to plan meals and distributions of supplies with the hours marked so reliably. But others grew troubled. Brother Albertus, my old novice master, came to me one evening in the scriptorium. "I fear we have lost something," he said quietly, so that the other brothers copying nearby would not hear. I used to wake in the night, my heart uncertain whether the hour had come. I would pray, asking God to help me rise when called, to give me strength to serve. Now I simply sleep, knowing the machine will wake me. I no longer pray for wakefulness. I trust the gears instead of trusting God. I spoke of this to Brother Conrad, expecting him to defend his creation. Instead, he surprised me with his answer. "Perhaps Brother Albertus is right," he said. We were in the tower, checking the mechanism as we did each day, ensuring the gears ran smoothly and the weight descended at the proper rate. Perhaps we have lost something, but consider what we have gained. Every office is observed. No hour goes unprayed. Is that not also worth something? "But at what cost?" I asked. He was quiet for a time, his hands resting on the wooden frame of the timekeeper, feeling the vibration of its steady tick. "I do not know," he said finally. "I thought I was building a tool to serve God. But tools shape their users as much as users shape tools. A scribe who copies manuscripts begins to think in the rhythms of copying, to see the world as something that can be reduced to letters on parchment. A farmer with a plough thinks of land in straight furrows, and we, with our timekeeper, begin to think of the day as a mechanism, each hour a gear that turns the next. Should we stop using it?" I asked. "No," he said firmly. "We cannot unknow what we have learned. The abbeys that hear of our timekeeper will want their own. Already I have received letters asking for instructions, for drawings, for assistance in building similar devices. The counting of hours will spread. Perhaps that is God's will, that we should mark our time more precisely, that we should waste less of the life he has given us. Or perhaps," I said slowly, thinking through the implications, "perhaps he gave us time unmeasured, so that we would not try to master it." Brother Conrad looked at me with an expression I could not read. "Then we have already failed," he said, "for we have mastered it after a fashion, and we cannot go back." The years that followed proved his words true. Other monasteries heard of our timekeeper and sent brothers to learn its construction. Brother Conrad taught them willingly, helping them return to their own communities with the knowledge needed to build similar devices. Within a decade, timekeeper bells were ringing in abbeys across southern Germany, Switzerland, and into France. The mechanisms evolved. Some monasteries built water-driven versions, using the steady flow to turn wheels rather than descending weights. Others devised escapements that allowed for greater precision, dividing the hours into smaller portions. The faces began to appear, circles marked with numbers, hands that swept around to show where in the day we stood. Towns took note. Merchants desired precise hours for their dealings. Guilds wanted to mark the beginning and end of work days. The church authorities saw value in synchronizing the faithful to common hours of prayer. What had begun in our modest monastery as a solution to monks sleeping through matins became something larger, something that would reshape how all of Christendom experienced the passage of time. I watched this transformation with mixed feelings. The timekeeper had solved the problem it was built to solve. We no longer missed offices. But it had created new questions, new uncertainties. We had wanted to serve the hours better. Instead, we had learned to divide them more finely, to account for each moment, to treat time as a resource that could be allocated and measured and spent. Brother Conrad lived to see his invention spread across Europe. He died in the year 1342, during a harsh winter when lung fever swept through our community. He was 70 years old, worn thin by decades of work and fasting. In his final days, as he lay in the infirmary with his breathing harsh and laboured, I sat beside him and held his hand. "Do you regret it?" I asked him. "The timekeeper?" He was silent for so long I thought he had not heard me, or that he lacked the strength to answer. But then his eyes opened, focusing on my face with an intensity that belied his weakness. "No," he whispered, "I regret nothing. We are given skills and knowledge so that we might use them. I used mine. Whether that service pleased God or merely pleased my own pride, I will know soon enough." He died that night, shortly before the bell rang for matins. The timekeeper called us to the church, faithful as always, and we sang the office for the dead, commending his soul to the mercy of the Almighty. The bell rang, the gears turned. Time continued its measured march. I am old now myself, approaching 70 years. My hand shakes as I write this account. The timekeeper still marks the hours in our tower, though it has been rebuilt twice, improved with each iteration. The ticking of its mechanism has become so familiar that we no longer notice it, just as we no longer notice the breathing of the brother who sits beside us in the choir. Looking back across these 40 years since we first installed that device, I wonder what we truly accomplished. We solved a practical problem. We helped our weak flesh serve our devoted spirit. We created something that has spread throughout Christendom and changed how people experience their days. But did we serve God, or did we serve our own desire for order and control? Did we enable deeper devotion, or did we automate it, making it mechanical rather than miraculous? I think now that these questions do not have simple answers. The timekeeper is both servant and master. It enables and constrains. It helps us remember to pray, but it also makes us forget that prayer is more than simply showing up when the bell rings. It divides time into pieces we can understand, but in doing so, it perhaps makes us forget that time is ultimately not ours to divide. The timekeeper works perfectly, he said. Too perfectly. It never fails. It never forgets. It never grows weary. And because it is so reliable, we have become less reliable in ourselves. We trust it to wake us, so we no longer cultivate the inner wakefulness that would rise without external call. We trust it to mark the hours, so we no longer develop the sense of time's passage that comes from attention and prayer. But surely, I said, surely it is better to observe the offices perfectly than to miss them because our human nature failed. Is it perfect observance if our hearts are not in it, he asked. Is it true prayer if we sing only because a machine has summoned us? The struggle was part of the devotion. The difficulty was part of the offering. We gave God our wakefulness, our effort, our will. Now we give him only our presence while the machine provides everything else. I had no answer for him then. I have no answer now, decades later. What I do know is this. We cannot unmake what we have made. The knowledge of timekeeping has spread too far, taken root too deeply. Towns across Europe now mark their hours by mechanical bells. Trade and governance are organised by the clock. Even warfare, that most ancient and terrible of human activities, is now conducted by schedules and synchronized movements timed by mechanical devices. We thought we were building a tool for prayer. Perhaps we were. Or perhaps we were building the foundation of a new world, one where time is no longer a divine mystery but a measurable resource, where hours are currency and moments are spent like coins. Did we serve God's will, or did we step beyond our place? I thought we were creating order out of chaos, imposing discipline upon our wayward flesh, but perhaps we were attempting something more fundamental, something closer to the ancient sin of eating from the tree of knowledge, of wanting to understand and control what should remain ineffable. The tower bell strikes the hour, sexed by the position of the sun through the scriptorium window. The sound is clear and bright, mechanical and utterly reliable. In half an hour, it will strike again, calling us to the church for the office of nun. We will rise from our work, the copying of manuscripts, the illumination of capital letters, the careful noting of texts in the margins, and we will process to the choir stalls and lift our voices in prayer. Will God hear us? Does it matter to him whether we come because our hearts have learned the rhythm of devotion or because a machine has called us with its brass voice? I pray that he looks upon the intent, not merely the mechanism. I pray that he sees in our imperfect attempts to serve him better a genuine desire for holiness, even if the methods we choose are flawed. But I no longer have the certainty I possessed in my youth. I thought then that problems had solutions, that devotion could be perfected through discipline and tools. Now I understand that the spiritual life is more complicated than gears and weights, more mysterious than water flowing or candles burning down. The timekeeper ticks in its tower, the hours are measured, the bells ring. We rise and pray and return to our labours, and time flows on, divided now into pieces we have named and counted, but no less incomprehensible for all our measuring. Would you have risen before dawn, had the bell not called your name? I do not know any more. I rise because the bell rings, and I am grateful for that certainty. But some nights, lying on my pallet in the dormitory, listening to the soft breathing of my brothers around me, and the distant tick of the mechanism in the tower, I wonder if we have gained the world but lost something we cannot name, some quality of faith that lived in uncertainty, some depth of devotion that required struggle. We built a clock to serve the hours of prayer, but in building it, we changed what prayer meant, what hours meant, what service meant. We did not intend this. We intended only to wake reliably for matins, yet intention and outcome are not always aligned, and the consequences of our actions extend far beyond our understanding. I think of Brother Conrad often, and of Brother Albertus, and of all the monks who struggled through the centuries before us to rise in the darkness and sing praise to God. They had no machine to help them. They had only will and devotion and the hope that grace would strengthen what flesh could not sustain. They failed often. They missed offices. They slept when they should have waked. But perhaps in that failing, in that struggle, there was something holy. Perhaps God values the attempt more than the achievement, the reaching more than the grasping, the desire more than the fulfillment. We have achieved what they could not. We rise for every office. We miss nothing. The hours are observed with mechanical precision. And yet, I wonder if we pray as deeply. I wonder if our devotion has grown more perfect or merely more regular. I wonder if we have measured time only to discover that what we really needed to measure was immeasurable faith and love and the stirring of the Holy Spirit in the chambers of the heart. The sun moves across the sky, the shadows lengthen, the bell will ring soon calling us to Vespers, the evening office. I will set aside this pen and this parchment. I will rise from my wooden stool. I will process with my brothers to the church, and we will sing the ancient psalms as monks have sung them for 1,000 years. The timekeeper will mark the hours, the gears will turn, the weight will descend, and I will pray for forgiveness, for wisdom, for understanding of what we have done and what it means. We thought we had built a servant of the bell. In truth, we had forged a master of our sleep. Whether that master serves God's purposes or our own, I leave to others to judge. I have told the story as I lived it, with honesty, if not with certainty. The clock ticks in its tower. Time flows toward whatever end awaits us all, and in the measuring, in the counting, in the division of hours into fragments we can grasp, perhaps we have found not mastery but merely another form of service, another way to offer our small human efforts to the infinite mystery we call God. May He accept what we have built and forgive what we may have broken in the building. Written at the Abbey of St. Benedict, Reichenau, in the year of our Lord 1347, by Brother Matthias, monk and sometime assistant to Brother Conrad, who first gave time a voice of brass and gears,